Well, welcome in, everybody, to the LSU Insider Postgame Show. LSU beats South Carolina 36-33. LSU outlasts South Carolina. LSU manages to avoid the final punch from South Carolina. I don't know what you want to say. They dragged themselves across the finish line. But I'm Zach Ewing with Koki Riley. We're here to take you through it, taking your comments live. We'll give you our take, our analysis live. Koki, I'm on the road. I'm on my way to Dallas for the Saints game tomorrow, but I had to stop and check out the end of that game. I kind of thought maybe I'd get to just listen on the radio the second half and coast through. That was not the case.
No. This was one of the wilder football games you will see all year. It's really just hard to sum it up in one statement, in one sentence, because it was everything. And there were some impressive moments from LSU, but there were a lot of unimpressive moments from LSU as well. And I obviously give them credit for lasting in that game, but they got a lot of good breaks, and they probably could have, and maybe even should have, won this game by more, given what happened to Lenore Sellers, and still barely pulled it out. So a lot for this team to still work on, but I think Brian Kelly will take the win. Can't hear you.
That's my first faux pas already. We'll take your comments live on Facebook and YouTube throughout the next half an hour or so. We'll be joined by Reed Darcy. He's going to listen in to Brian Kelly's press conference and see if there's anything of interest and come back and report with us. I don't know how you summarize that game. LSU falls behind 17-0. Just looked like they didn't want to be there, which was shocking. I mean, we talked about it, Koki, during the LSU Insider podcast this week, that this is a huge game. I mean, it became a bigger game than you thought. It's their SEC opener. South Carolina is going to bring the energy with College Game Day in town, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, LSU kind of came out super flat, gave up a touchdown on the first drive, turned it over, gave up a field goal, had a punt blocked, had that returned for a touchdown, and before you could really blink, it's 17-0.
Yeah, absolutely. And they came out slow. They came out sluggish. And it was really alarming just how much faster and quicker and stronger South Carolina was, really on both sides of the ball, but especially defensively. It was just such an impressive performance from South Carolina's defense to start that game. And, and on the flip side, I was really disappointed by LSU's defense, especially up front. They were getting destroyed on the ball by South Carolina's offensive line, and they were able to run the ball at will, set themselves up in good down and distance situations to throw the ball in. And Lenore Sellers made enough easy plays for them to be able to move up and down the field pretty easily. He also, granted, it could have been even worse because, after the turnover, what was it? I think they punted it away, and South Carolina had it at the LSU 30. But Sellers threw an interception when it was already 7-0. And that could have easily been another touchdown or at least a field goal. This game could have been 20-0 or 24-0. So again, it was a really manic start, and things only got crazier from there.
Yeah, and then LSU kind of reasserts control. I thought they played a really good kind of second half of the second quarter there. They get within 24-16 at halftime. They come right out in the third quarter, take the ball down inside the 5, and then get stuffed. Try to throw a pass on fourth down. It didn't work. Garrett Nussmeier was under a lot of pressure. They needed half a yard with this offensive line and decided to throw the ball. I don't hate the call. Like if you suck the defense in and have a wide open receiver in the end zone for an easy touchdown, okay, but it didn't work. Then they get the ball back again, go down and score again, but fail to get the 2-point conversion. Go down and score again. This is now 3 drives that they've made in the second half, one that got stopped half a yard short, 2 others that result in touchdowns, and you're only up 5 points. And then South Carolina immediately, Rocket Sanders goes the other way. Was it 75-yard touchdown run? And and South Carolina retakes the lead. LSU fumbles. Garrett Nussmeier not ready for the snap. It goes right off his face mask. Defense, to their credit, in that instance, held South Carolina to a field goal. And then finally LSU able to take the lead again. But it's like whiplash. That you had control and your head keeps whipping the other way.
This whole game was a whiplash, right? They score that touchdown. Then there's the LSU turnover, and then you hold them to a field goal, which was one of the better moments of the defense all day. But then LSU marches down the field and looks like they're going to score and take the lead with 6-7 minutes left, and all of a sudden Nussmeier throws an interception. It was the one big mistake he made all day. He just didn't see the edge rusher dropping back into coverage. So yeah, and again, they had first and goal at the 2 and they didn't score, as you mentioned. They had the interception, they had the miscue with the snap, and all that stuff happened, and yet they still were able to win this game after being down through most of that, because I wouldn't say it was the only reason, but it was a big reason. It's Lenore Sellers getting hurt at the end of the first half, be injured with ankle, and that just really, really affected their offense. They basically couldn't throw the ball after that. Robbie Ashford had a lot of trouble finding receivers. He found one downfield on that final drive, but that was roughly it. And it was just a really chaotic performance from South Carolina's offense after that, because they didn't really have much of a passing game, and the rushing game was inconsistent, even though they had that one big drive. And it's hard to run the ball when the other team knows you're going to run the ball every time. And South Carolina's offense was very hampered after that Sellers injury, for sure.
Yeah, chaotic is a good word for this whole game. In general, it was chaos. It lasted over 4 hours. If South Carolina makes that final field goal, it's going to go up to, they're probably still playing, and we're at 4.5 hours. It was insane. We all like college football. We're not going to complain about more of it, but there was timeouts and reviews and challenges on every
penalties
on every play. I want to show some comments here. Lynette says, no running game at all. LSU ran. They did run for 132 yards, 4.1 yards per carry. I will say, in favor of what Lynette says there, when they needed a yard, you couldn't comfortably get the yard, and that's not a good sign.
That's true.
Stuart says lucky Kelly, a little bit lucky today, because if he loses this game, we kind of shrugged off the hot seat talk after the loss to USC. If you lose this game and you're 1-2 and you've lost your conference opener and the college football playoff is already on life support, the hot seat's there. He's not going to get fired or anything, but the hot seat is there. Craig says reality won this game on athleticism, will, and talent. Coaching staff did absolutely nothing. Leave points out. They definitely left points out on the field. I don't know about the coaching staff doing nothing, but I wouldn't say it was Brian Kelly's finest hour.
Yeah, it wasn't Brian Kelly. In terms of play calling and stuff like that, I didn't have a huge issue. There's nothing that really pops up to me right now. But what definitely did pop out to me from a coaching perspective is just, again, it was another undisciplined, ugly performance from LSU in general. You think of the turnovers, you think of the penalties, you think of just the blown assignments on those 2 long rushing touchdowns. Even some inexplicable plays in the secondary. It was just stuff like that. And the bad tackling, man, they did not tackle well in this game at all. All of that sort of stuff has just been a continuous theme, even from last season for this team, at least when they're not going well. And the fact that you saw that again in this game, and given the amount of mistakes that they made, was really something. And just to get back to the sort of that luck comment, that lucky Kelly comment, there was the Sellers injury, right? But there was also the offensive pass interference call that really wasn't offensive pass interference in the fourth quarter. They complete that play. South Carolina has the ball inside the LSU 30 and I'm trying to remember what the score was at the time, but I think South Carolina
33-29, right?
Yeah, I think they might have been up by 4 at that point. So again, that was a game-changing play, and then that ended up turning into the turnover that they forced in the back, that Braden Swinson forced a couple plays later in the backfield. So there was so much happening in this game; it's hard to keep track right afterwards doing a show like this. But at the same time, that was a huge play, and again, I don't know where the offensive pass interference was on that play, because I just didn't see it, and the broadcast didn't see it either.
Yeah, we got some comments of refs won the game for LSU, refs biased. Had the QB not gotten injured, all that stuff. Like, there was quite a bit of luck there for LSU. There's no doubt about it. But look, in this sport, you survive in advance, and LSU did, and they're now 2-1. We'll talk about what's up next. They just got a lot to clean up, Koki. I mean, we can talk about some of the red flags. They had that failure on the goal line, the blocked punt, some penalties, like all sorts of different things that you just go, that's not what winning teams do.
The bad snap on the extra point, like they did so many.
The fumble that hits Nussmeier in the face, all that stuff.
Yeah, they did so many things in this game to try to lose the game. They really tried to lose the game. I mean, that's the best way to just. They tried to give this game away so many different times, and I don't think you can't deny that. And combine that with the fact that they also had those lucky bounces. It's hard to feel like good if you're an LSU fan after this, other than the fact that they won. You feel more relieved than good after a game like this, just because of how they performed. But I do want to kind of get back to that sort of that running game comment from earlier. I think when Caden Durham ran the ball, they ran the ball better than they have all season when they put the ball in his hands, because Durham did a really good job of breaking tackles, of finding the hole, of really exploiting holes. And
11 carries, 98 yards.
Yeah, because it was such a contrast between him and the other running backs LSU had out there, because you could see that LSU's other running backs, Josh Williams and Caleb Jackson, really had trouble finding the hole. And it just seemed like it was more of a vision problem than even a blocking problem, because, again, there weren't a lot of negative runs in this game, again, for LSU's offensive line. And I know LSU's offensive line didn't really climb up to the second level like you'd like them to, but at the same time, like it was, I just feel like one of the problems with this running game may be, and again, I'm not an expert, but it may be that these running backs are just not, finding those creases, finding those holes, and breaking those tackles that you need your running backs to do, your good running backs to do. And Caden Durham was doing that in this game, and that to me was the biggest difference. It wasn't just the blocking. I mean, blocking had obviously a hand to do with it, but I really do feel like Durham really gave him a shot in the arm, and a lot of it was simply just because of him.
Yeah, and I like MB 2020's comment here. Running game is the lack of patience and field vision. It does feel with Caleb Jackson sometimes like he's in a hurry, and he's not letting those holes develop. And as you said, when Durham was in there, it was a different story, and you saw the result of that. And that the good news is, I think that's fixable, that's coachable. Now you could argue it should have been fixed by now, but I don't think it's not a lack of talent. It's not something that Caleb Jackson can't do. It's just a matter of getting him to kind of slow the game down a little bit. Mark has a comment here. Got to get better, especially on defense. How would you rate the defense, Koki? I mean, at times certainly they played well. They held South Carolina to under 400 yards. They had 3 takeaways. I'm going to say with this offense, those statistics are normally good enough to win. However, there were still some key failures at times.
Yeah, I mean, 2 60-plus yard rushing touchdowns that are just pretty inexcusable, especially the second one when you knew they couldn't throw the ball in that game. You still gave up over nearly 400 yards to an offense that didn't really have much of a passing game for the entire game, and really didn't have a passing game at all for half the game. And that's pretty concerning, because Sellers missed even when Sellers was healthy, he missed a lot of easy throws, and he basically gave the ball away on that one interception. So I mean, when you're facing quarterback play that's that pedestrian, you should be able to play better defensively, especially if you just concentrate on the run. And they still had some big mistakes in the run against the run. I thought they played better defensively as the game went along, but again, it's hard to say that for sure when South Carolina was obviously hampered. So I think overall it's hard to fully evaluate their performance. I thought their pass rush was pretty good in this game. And I thought Blake Baker designed some very nifty blitzes. And they got Harold Perkins a little bit more involved in this game, but I think overall it was still like the tackling was poor. The secondary play was okay to mediocre at best. And, if you wonder, like, if Sellers was healthy, then does the defense is this even uglier for LSU's defense? So it's a hard performance to sort of rate, and it's a little incomplete because of the injury. So I was impressed by LSU's pass rush. Like Braden Swinson had a really good game. But I think outside of that, it's hard to pick out any strength that this defense had today.
Yeah, I mean, Braden Swinson, shout out to him. That was the fumble that he had, that he forced, that Major Burns recovered on that blitz was, I mean, that looked like it was going to win the game. And then, of course, Nussmeier throws the pick six that LSU gets bailed out on the personal foul penalty on the return. And that saved their bacon, too, because otherwise that pick six makes it 40-29 Carolina with just, I think, like 4 or 5 minutes left. But Braden Swinson did set that sequence up. He had another couple of nice plays. Want to let you know you're watching the LSU Sports Insider post-game show, and we are discussing LSU's 36-33 victory over South Carolina that maybe didn't always feel like a victory for the Tigers, but they do survive in advance. So let us know your comments. Keep it clean. We'll show them on the screen and respond to the ones that we feel like we can respond to. Also want to let you know that the LSU Sports Insider is brought to you by Waste Pro. Tiger fans, if you're planning a tailgate or event, keep your guests comfortable with portable toilets from Waste Pro. Call 225-744-6400 and mention the LSU Sports Insider for a special offer. Some stats, Koki. Garrett Nussmeier, his stats look good. 24-40, 285 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Certainly a slow start. Made a couple of mistakes. You talked about the pick at the end where he kind of throws off his back foot into traffic. But for the most part, I was impressed with Nussmeier again today.
Again, he's the least of their problems, despite the fact the interception was rough. But sometimes that's going to happen when a blitzer drops into coverage like that when you're not expecting it. South Carolina's got a pretty darn good defense, so they were still able to move the ball, and I think their running game certainly helped them out in terms of like the consistency and stabilizing the offense from a down-to-down basis and getting them in better scenarios to get the ball to Kyron Lacey and company downfield. But anyway, just as for Nussmeier's performance in general, I thought he made some absolutely incredible throws, especially to the middle of the field in this game. There was one throw he made to Aaron Anderson. I think it was like in the second quarter that was honestly jaw-dropping. I mean, the guy, he has a defender in his lap, and he basically has to layer a throw over the linebacker 20 yards downfield into just this very, very tight window. It was a Sunday throw, and he made a couple of those sort of throws today where I was incredibly impressed. And I thought his performance was a little bit better than his raw numbers, 24-40 for 285 and 2 touchdowns. And again, they have a quarterback and they have the weapons that can get open. I mean, obviously it's better if this team has Chris Hilton than not, but at the same time, like Aaron Anderson's been able to consistently get open through 3 games. Same goes with Kyron Lacey. And there's no reason to think that those guys can't get open even against some of the top teams in the country, because they just got a lot of talent at that receiver spot, and they've got guys stepping up at that spot too. So I was impressed by it's hard not to be too impressed by the passing attack in this game, even if there were other aspects of LSU's offense that were, there was stuff left on the table, and performances that were not as good as you expected to be, I guess.
Yeah, it's one thing to say, just clean up the mistakes, and it was just fine, because football games come with mistakes and defenses force mistakes, and so that's kind of part of the story. So Nussmeier was fine. LSU rushing the ball, we mentioned 32 carries, 132 yards. Most of that was Caden Durham, 11 carries, 98 yards. That's 8.9 yards average, 2 touchdowns. Caleb Jackson, just 7 carries, 27 yards, and that's with he did have a 19-yard rush. His other 6 carries just go for 8 yards. So he's now at, I believe, 69 yards through 3 games, averaging less than 3 yards a carry, or just over 3 yards a carry. So he continues to kind of be in slow motion kind of. Josh Williams, just 10 carries for 20 yards. He did, of course, have the big touchdown at the end. And look, the other thing about LSU rushing 32 carries, 132 yards, that counts negative 25 yards on 3 sacks. In college, sacks count as rush yards, which is a whole nother podcast. But
it's just terrible.
It doesn't make any sense. But you have to also factor in Nussmeier 3 carries for negative 25 yards. He got sacked 3 times. So you take that out. It was 29 carries for 157 yards, and now you're up over 5 yards a carry, and you can live with. Yeah.
That's good math, Zach. I'm really impressed. The quick journalism math right there.
I was a stat minor, man.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
The rare journalist who can really do math. But yeah, like if that's the case, then you'll take that every day if you're averaging 5 yards a carry or even 4.5 yards a carry, right? So again, like when Caden Durham started getting the bulk of the carries, that's when things changed. And I don't think that's a coincidence because I don't think the blocking got like substantially better when Caden Durham was in the game, right? That's not what I noticed. And I think you have to question with Josh Williams and Caleb Jackson, like, can those guys be more patient? Can those guys, display better vision, and just trying to find the hole? Can those guys, make more guys miss in a phone booth? If you know what I mean, like breaking tackles and juking guys out, like that is a key part of the position. And Josh Williams just hasn't done a ton of that this season, and nor has Caleb Jackson, which is pretty mystifying given how explosive he was last season. But Durham, he was like a jitterbug out there, a scatterbug. He was juking out defenders and showed this underrated level of strength that we didn't really see as much in the preseason. So it was a very promising performance from him, and it definitely makes you feel better about this LSU offense moving forward as long as they can clean up some of these mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue you don't need the running game to be super explosive.
Yeah,
it obviously helps, but if you're just taking what this offensive line is giving you and you're getting 4, 5, 6 yards every time you run and avoiding the negative play, you're passing. Then the opponent has to respect the run, and if they do that, your passing game certainly good enough to make them pay. And so I think LSU took a step in the right direction. MB 2020, another comment. Type of games that can launch a team into a great remainder of the season. 100%. Every good team has a game during a season. You look back when they go 10-2, 11-1, and say, "Hey, remember how they survived that Saturday? They played that early game at South Carolina and should have lost."
Yeah,
and you kind of forget about it because they played so well after that. But the trick is, of course, getting LSU to they've got to improve, or else there's just going to be more close calls, and eventually there's going to be more that don't go their way.
You're not winning that game if it's against Ole Miss. I'm sorry. Right. I assume at least. But I mean, they got a couple weeks now to sort of really fine tune this thing, at least 3 weeks, including a bye week in there. It's UCLA next week, but that's a game that you should certainly win. I don't think that team's as talented as the South Carolina team is. And then you have South Alabama after that. I know South Alabama just scored 87 points on Northwestern State this week, but Northwestern State's had a really tough start to the season.
That's a different Louisiana school. I'm not sure. I think South Alabama probably knows that.
Yeah, exactly. So I assuming they win these next 2 games, as they absolutely should. They have no excuse to not win these next 2 games. It's not as tough as this game was going to be. Then you're heading into this massive Ole Miss matchup, probably going to be 2 top 15-ish teams in the country, and we'll see where they're at when we get to that game.
Watching the LSU Sports Insider. It's brought to you by Waste Pro after LSU's 36-33 victory over South Carolina this morning. College game day was in Columbia. The crowd was all geeked up. They did the sandstorm. Everybody came out, and then South Carolina takes a 17-0 lead. I think it was early in the second quarter. I can't even remember now. That was hours ago. You just think, man, LSU walked right into this trap, and they are a dead team walking. But to their credit, they found a way. And that's what good teams do sometimes when things don't go their way, and they don't have their A game certainly. And I think LSU would tell you they didn't have their A game today. Did they catch some breaks? Absolutely, abso-freaking-lutely, they caught some breaks. But again, you take advantage of it. You find a way to win. South Carolina misses the field goal at the end of the game, and LSU's touchdown from Josh Williams is the game winner. We'll be joined by Reed Darcy here in a few minutes. He's listening to Brian Kelly's press conference, and he'll check in with some of his comments. Koki, as you were saying, LSU returns home. They don't play another road game now for like a month. They have UCLA next week. UCLA is a big name school. They are home underdogs to Indiana today. They barely beat Hawaii. It's not a good UCLA team. Definitely a team LSU should beat. Then South Alabama the week after that, and then a bye week leading into Ole Miss. So as you said, zero reason LSU should not be comfortably 4-1 at this point, with the Rebels coming to Tiger Stadium where they historically struggle, and then a chance. I mean, look, you win that game and your season is not only back on track, but you're flying.
Yeah, absolutely. Doesn't get a lot easier after that. You got Texas A&M the next week, and that's a team that is certainly talented and pretty frisky. And many people vote, or I have them in the top 25, even if my fellow voters do not. So so it's not going to get a lot easier after that. And I think they got Arkansas not long after that as well. And Arkansas lost to Oklahoma State, but they showed some potential in that game at the very least. Taylor Green made some really very interesting throws. So, I mean, that's when you really start getting into the meat of the schedule. Like that Ole Miss game is kind of the indicator of, all right, this SEC schedule is getting real. And that's, again, it's going to be very, very, it's only going to get tougher from there. So, again, that Ole Miss game is it's absolutely massive in terms of determining what the season's going to look like. If you lose that game, I guess if you lose a close game, then I guess there's still some promise as to,
you'd still have to win out though. You'd still have to win out to make the playoff.
Yeah. Just in terms of the big picture. But if you lose that game in ugly fashion, for example, then I think you might be right back to where you started in terms of, some of the skepticism around this team after the USC game, or even during this actual game against South Carolina. So we'll see.
Yeah, but surviving, playing poorly, and winning is much better than playing poorly and losing. That is for sure. Kind of continuing to go through the stats here. LSU's receiving core. Aaron Anderson was their leading receiver on the day. He had 5 catches for 96 yards. Kyron Lacey, 5 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown. He also had that big catch late that was overturned, right? And then I'm trying to remember now. And then there was another one that was overturned into a catch.
Yeah, so, the second one was turned into a catch, that was the right call. And then the first one was overturned to a no catch, which was also the right.
Right, his knees were down out of bounds when he caught the ball.
His knee was down before he caught
Game
the
of
ball.
inches.
Yeah.
Mason Taylor led the team with 6 catches for 58 yards and a touchdown. C.J. Daniels, 4 catches, 53 yards. Josh Williams, 2 for 15. So again, spreading the ball around, not quite the same as last year when it was, it was all Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas, and Aaron Anderson and Kyron Lacey are clearly the dudes on this team. But Nuss is showing the propensity to spread that ball around, and that makes it hard to defend.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like this team's got a lot of weapons. They got plenty of weapons. They got plenty of guys who can get open. That's not the issue. The issue is just trying to find consistency from a down-to-down basis and getting yourself into advantageous situations to where that the danger of that passing attack can, not doubles and triples, because you're in 2nd and 1, you're in 3rd and 2 on a consistent basis, and that's what running the ball. That's why running the ball is important. That's what running the ball does for you. Because if you can't, take the easy yards that the defense gives you because they're respecting your dangerous pass attack, then it's hard to be able to rip off those 20, 30 yard throws on a consistent basis. I mean, it's a lot easier to rip off those 20 to 30 yard throws when you're also running the ball 5 yards a carry, kind of like what they did today. I think they would have scored even more points in the 36 that they had if it weren't for some of those turnovers. So
turnovers and getting stopped on 4th down. Yeah, I mean they could have had 50. Easy.
I mean they could have had 50. The way they were just moving the ball efficiently, because they actually had a running game in this game, unlike the last 2 games. You definitely. I mean, this offense. I mean, the ceiling maybe isn't quite as high as last year's, because how can it be? But if you can run the ball. If you can run the ball like you did today, and then eliminate the turnovers, it's gonna be hard for anyone to stop this team, because that South Carolina defense is pretty good, And then it really comes down to your defense just being decent.
Hey, we're gonna welcome in Reed Darcy to the LSU Sports Insider postgame show here. LSU beat South Carolina 36-33. Reed, you were talking, or listening in anyway, to Brian Kelly's press conference. What's the feeling after that one? Is it relief? Is it excitement? Hey, we can get better, and we still won. What was the feeling?
It has to be relief, right? I mean, I can't think of any other way. I'm not exactly sure, sitting here a few minutes after the game ended, I'm not exactly sure how LSU pulled that off, going down 17-0, getting the lead and then losing the lead again. But yeah, it was super impressive win in the fourth quarter. You know, when you think back to LSU's problems against USC, Brian Kelly was so angry that they couldn't finish the game, right? They had a lead in the fourth quarter and they didn't hang on to it. But this time they did have a lead in the fourth quarter. They did let it slip away, but then they got it back and they hung on again. So yeah, I'd imagine Brian Kelly is a little relieved that LSU pulled this one out. He said that they didn't finish. They played 2 close games, didn't finish one, did finish another. So I'd imagine he's pretty relieved, but still kind of concerned given some of the issues that cropped up throughout the game today.
Yeah, and coaches always say they like to fix mistakes after wins instead of losses, and that's what LSU gets to do. You know, we'll spare for a moment to talk about what would have happened if LSU had not pulled this out, because then you really got some red flags out there. But they did, and I think, you know, for everybody saying Brian Kelly was out-coached and everything, it takes good coaching to keep that sort of mental fortitude in place to pull a game like this out that has so many dramatic swings. Koki and I have been talking, Reed. The offense really, really efficient. Just got to cut back on some mistakes. They had a couple of turnovers, obviously also the blocked punt return for a touchdown, which is a disaster. But for the most part, when they needed to move the ball, they were able to move the ball.
Yeah, and let me give y'all a stat real quick. That's going to be in a story we got on the advocate.com in a little bit. Caden Durham, when LSU ran the ball with Caden Durham, they averaged 8.9 yards per carry. When they ran the ball with someone not named Caden Durham, I believe they averaged 2.8 yards per carry. So Caden Durham, well, it might have been your most efficient source of offense today. LSU might have really found something in him. He was, I'm sure y'all talked about him already. He ran the ball well. He was breaking tackles. He was really creating yards, aside from the ones that LSU's offensive line gave him by opening up rushing lanes. So LSU may have figured out something in this run game, right? We talked the past 2 weeks about how LSU struggled to run the ball. They struggled to run against USC. They struggled to run against Nichols. And everyone was saying, why can't LSU run the ball? They're supposed to have, you know, one of the best offensive lines in the country and then a group of real solid, dependable backs. Well, what's the issue here? I think LSU might have figured something out here, especially with Caden Durham, because he was super impressive. Like I said, created his own yards, used his legs to break tackles and get into the end zone. 2 touchdowns, 98 yards, I believe, on 11 carries. So he was great, and I expect him to be a part of the offense moving forward for sure.
I got to give you credit, because I think those stats that you said, you did take out the Nussmeier sacks
yes,
from the other. Yeah. So hat tip to you, sir. That's good. That's just good reporting right there. But yeah, I mean, it's a stark contrast. He looked great. I mean, I think he has to be RB1 going into UCLA now, right? I mean, I don't see how you can argue with that performance.
Yeah, he was definitely the most electrifying running back that LSU had. It's definitely the most explosive back they've had so far. So yeah, I'd expect. I don't know if I'll say run RB1, because I do think they're going to keep Josh Williams and Caleb Jackson involved. They're probably going to split carries between the 3 of those guys. I don't see them phasing either of those 2 guys out of the offense, so they're probably going to have a rotation. But yeah, Caden Durham has to be involved because he really showed something today.
A word on the defense, Reed. You know, gave up about 400 yards, but they did get 3 takeaways. They got the final stop, the missed field goal there at the end to win the game. Good enough, I would say, and maybe some signs to build on.
Yes, for sure. I mean, when I think about the turnovers, I think those are kind of plays that LSU's defense did not make last year, right? And the turnovers really came from really exotic blitz packages and sort of disguised blitzes that Blake Baker likes to put out there. You know, the first one where Sage Ryan had the sack fumble. Sage Ryan came blitzing from the safety spot. Whit Weeks sort of came in, he faked the blitz and then dropped back into coverage, and then Harold Perkins came in from the other linebacker spot. So you can tell that Lenora Sellers really had a tough time recognizing that blitz and handling it once it came, and Sage Ryan was able to get in there, force a fumble, and that really helped LSU overcome that early deficit. And the same goes for that other turnover they had later in the game. It was sort of came on a disguised blitz. I don't remember specifically what happened, but it really helped LSU create more disruption, create more havoc. And that's a difference, like I mentioned earlier, it's a difference between last year's defense and this one. Last year's defense sat back and waited for offenses to go at it and pick up yards, this defense is more active. It's more proactive. And it really tries to force the issue. It might get beat sometimes. It might give up explosive plays, but at least it doesn't just sit back and let defenses carve it up. It goes after opposing offenses, and that should be a positive sign that LSU fans can look at going forward.
Okay, let's wrap things up here on the LSU Sports Insider postgame show with some final thoughts. Those of you watching the stream, thank you for watching. If you have final thoughts, leave them in the comments. I'll just say this on Facebook. I can see all the, some people just hit like, right, which is great. But of the other, the 10 people who didn't hit like, you got 5 loves, 2 ha-has, a sad, and a couple of angries. And that pretty well, I think, sums up the way LSU fans feels like. We love that we won, but this is funny, and we're sad and angry at the way they won a little bit. And you're 10% scared and angry, but 80%, hey, we won. So I don't know. Sum things up, Koki. How can you sum that thing up?
Yeah, it was the way the game went, right? It was just a roller coaster of emotions, up and down. And just to kind of add on to Reed's point, I thought Blake Baker did a really good job of designing some of these blitzes. They did a really good job of mixing up who to send and when, and sending in stunts and sending in simulated pressures. It was a very, very impressive performance, just a sort of creativity in the pass rush. And I gotta say, and with the running game, I did think it was they did have a couple more wrinkles in the running game that, I thought didn't always work out. I think they ran a 3-back formation with Gabe Relaford at fullback on the goal line twice, and it just didn't work. But I respected the creativity, at least, which is something that I've been sort of looking for from this running game. After the first 2 weeks, it just seemed like they ran inside zone every single time. But this game, they sort of hit the perimeter a little more. They gave Xavier Thomas a carry on a counter run at one point, which worked really, really well. Just getting creative, getting a little more creative and running stuff outside of just inside zone. They did that in this game, and I think that helped them out a little bit outside of just the Caden Durham stuff, which I think was mainly the primary reason. But because Reed, I don't know what you saw exactly, but for me, I thought the run blocking was roughly the same for all 3 running backs, and Caden Durham just did a better job of finding the hole and beating the extra man to get a few extra yards.
Yeah, Caden Durham really created his own yards. He broke a lot of tackles. I'm curious to see what the stats look like after the game from Pro Football Focus, how they chart, sort of missed tackles forced, all that kind of stuff. I'm curious to see what Caden Durham looks like when that comes out. I'm sure it'll look really good based on the number of missed tackles he forced. But I think before we get out of here, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Garrett Nussmeier. Played a really gutsy game. He wasn't perfect at all. He made some of his throws were kind of rough. He made a few mistakes, but he also took a lot of big hits, and that's one thing that we were kind of concerned about going into this game, given South Carolina's pass rushers and its overall ability to pressure the quarterback. Nuss took a lot of big hits, but he stayed in there. He made some really insane throws. I can think of 2 or 3 of them right off the top of my head. A couple of them went to Aaron Anderson. So LSU won this game because in part because he stayed poised and he delivered some really crucial throws when they needed him to, and he kept his composure, particularly in the red zone. Like I said, it wasn't always perfect, but he also played. I thought he played a really nice game.
I gotta say, it wasn't a very impressive for LSU's tackles. I thought Will Campbell and Emory Jones got beat more than you would expect them to get beat by freshmen. Granted, those are 2 extremely talented freshmen, and and they made a couple of mistakes toward the end of that game. But at the same time, you'd expect your 3rd-year starter, projected first-round pick, offensive tackles to play a little bit better in a game like that, and not make a couple of the mistakes that they seemed like they made, whether it was in pass pro or even with run blocking on a couple of situations on the perimeter. So that's just something to keep an eye out for. I thought Nussmeier got pressured more in this game than I expected him to.
Yeah, we got a comment here. Did they get a pick? Yeah, they had a pick 6 called back because of a penalty. It was like a 90-yard penalty, as it turns out. South Carolina had a pick 6, 100-yard pick 6 called back on a personal foul that was huge. I mean, South Carolina probably has that game won if that play stands.
Yeah.
They're up 40-29 with I think 4 minutes left. Instead, LSU gets new life. South Carolina did get the ball, but LSU able to get the stop on defense, get it back, score, and ultimately win the game. So, look, little lucky. Some signs to be concerned about, but ultimately a win. LSU beat South Carolina 36-33. They return home to face UCLA next Saturday at Tiger Stadium. We will return to the LSU Insider Studio on Monday with our next episode. For Koki Riley and Reed Darcy, this is the LSU Insider Postgame Show. You can read all of our coverage from Columbia from Wilson Alexander and Scott Rabelais on theadvocate.com/LSU. I'm Zach Ewing. We're brought to you by Waste Pro, and we appreciate everybody joining us, and we will see you Monday.